This is the maturity model for Microsoft 365 practitioners session, part of the rather marvelous PNP program of events and presentations. And I'm very pleased to introduce both my colleague Simon Doy as one of today's speakers, and equally exciting, even more exciting for me actually, because I know Simon really well. So even more exciting because I know Todd less well. Todd Klindt from well, actually, I didn't know until last week you worked for Sympraxis as well. So I must get that story out of you sometime.
We try not to tell too many people that.
No, you're very secretive about who works for you, which worries me. Anyway, enough frivolity. So we've got two sessions being covered today in a bit of a departure from our normal way of doing things, where we usually focus all of our efforts on just the one. So let's have the next slide and see where that takes us. This is something like an agenda. Then we're going to do our usual thing of just reminding you what the practitioner and maturity model is all about, just in case there are new people, because there's always new people on these calls. We're going to grab a quick shout out and picture time so that we can crow about how wonderful the attendance was this week at next month's session, or actually January's session, but more on that in a minute. Then we'll talk about how you might contribute to the maturity model stuff, and then we'll get on to the main event. I'm going to try and rush through the first bits quite quickly, because people couldn't do catch up, and a lot of people have heard this all before. If you have somehow inadvertently come across these practitioner meetings and would like to do it regularly, click that link. That link will give you oh, actually, this is not clickable. We're not in PowerPoint Live. You have to copy that link. But if you grab that link, that'll download a full calendar set for you for all the forthcoming practitioner sessions. And maybe, Marc, you'd be kind enough to post that link into the chat for those people who didn't get a chance to copy it down. So the purpose of the maturity model is, we're not going to read all the words out, but it's a mechanism for letting organizations benchmark themselves and know what kinds of steps they could take to make themselves actually better businesses. We've got a whole set of competencies, which we'll talk about on the right in a moment, but across a set of different competencies in a really flexible way that lets you decide what parts of your organization need improving at what rate, according to your own localized needs. So it's not a one size fits all, it's a set of tools and a fairly quantitative, objective kind of a way of going about improving your organization. It also gives you a way of actually talking about those improvements with your colleagues and oftentimes with your executive leadership, so they know where it is that their hard-earned dollars are going to be spent or not. So on the right hand side in purple, we've got all the competencies we've actually published to date. And you can see, although they're often grounded in sort of technologies, they're not technology specific. What we do is we say these are good business approaches. If you want to improve your collaboration, here's what rubbish looks like, here's what terrific looks like, and here are what the levels in between look like. And you can use those to benchmark and then improve yourself by picking individual activities and go, we need to be better at that thing, and that'll make us a bit better at collaboration overall. We haven't done everything we want to do. In light purple are things that we really should have published already this year, but we haven't and probably aren't going to. So we'll carry on working on those. In grey, we've got some additional useful tools, including how to run a 365 maturity model workshop, and you've got access to all of the practitioner recordings that we've been doing over the last couple of years. And then on the right hand side, in some kind of vague green color, we have some supporting articles. These form either sort of principles, what are the principles of collaboration or the principles of communication, for example, and then how do you go about very specifically using some actual named technologies as opposed to in principle, how do you go about improving or elevating some of your positions? So there's a bunch of supporting articles. Next slide, please, Marc. Here we go. This is how the maturity model works in general. So we have 5 levels, which we label levels 100 to 500. And there's a brief description of what kind of attributes or characteristics you might expect at each level. So I've already described level 100 as being rubbish. At the rubbish level, your processes are probably ad hoc, not well thought out. They respond to things in the moment. People don't really know what they're supposed to do. They only know what they're doing. There's not a lot of oversight. There's not a lot of structure. There tends to be a certain amount of chaos, instability, and with that comes some frustration. And as we move up the levels, you'll see we move in towards some attempt to doing control. You have policies and procedures in place at level 200, but level 300, those policies and procedures are actually being followed routinely and are making a proper difference all the time. At level 400, you're starting to get feedback loops to make sure your policies and procedures, your processes are being improved on an ongoing basis. And at level 500, you've got really sophisticated mechanisms for driving all that and optimizing what you actually do day to day, moment to moment, and year to year. So that's the very short version of the maturity model. There's one of these for each competency that talks about the same sorts of process, but in the context of that competency. And next. Oh yes, look at that. We're on to picture time. So what we'd like everyone to do, everyone who isn't desperately, horrendously shy, which might be some people, is put your video on like we have here. And then we're going to grab a screenshot of everybody waving on cue. And that's what we use for next month's, next time's version of this slide. So stick your video on. I'm just going to pull up my view of all the people so I can see who's got videos on. And then Marc, I think you need to take us into group mode.
I have done that. So if you're, oh, wait, sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. Here you go.
Oh, okay, there we go. That's it. Lovely. And so from now, I'll start waving, me included.
All righty.
Fantastic. And that was us grabbing the picture for next time. And thank you for that, everybody. Do feel free to stay on video because it helps all of us to actually see who we're talking to. But if you insist on being shy, we won't hold it against you.
And Meredith, you've always got that great smile. That always helps.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to see you all.
Yes, I like seeing people too, especially all of these people around the world. It's rather fantastic. Right, next slide.
All right, sorry. Yes, wrong screen, different button. There we go.
Okay. This whole process is meant to be very interactive and involving. So, terrific that you've joined us here today. We really like that. But if you want to get even more involved, there's a bunch of ways you can do that. You could tell us what you're doing with the maturity model, and we'll get you, if you're really up for it, to come and do one of these sessions in future, because that would be fun. You can absolutely contribute directly to the maturity models that have been published. If you jump onto the the models published on the Microsoft Learn site, there's an edit button or a feedback button which will take you through to GitHub. And once you've gone into GitHub, you can actually make live updates to the documents. I say live, I mean, you'll update them live, but then we'll approve them to make sure there isn't unfortunate things in there. And if we're happy with what you've done, we'll go and publish those to live. So you can actually make contributions, extend them, change them, make suggestions, whatever you like, directly to the stuff we've already produced. You can give that same sort of feedback to us directly. So you can get hold of us and email us or Twitterers or whatever it is you like to do. Or you can do the other thing of just sharing this stuff out there so that more and more people find out about it. We've been doing this a couple of years now, but we're starting to see the maturity model appear in conferences that people who are not part of the core group are picking up and going, this is what I'm doing with the maturity model. This is how I'm using the maturity model to improve, say, search. And that actually is something from one of the countries or the world's leading search MVPs. So feel free to push the message out there, use it yourself, tell us what you did. Equally, in these sessions, ask questions. We're going to be nice to you. Let's just make sure we're all happy and friendly, but share any feedback you've got. Don't be shy to challenge us, to make suggestions, to tell us if we've got something wrong or there's something we could improve. We're good for that. Right. Next one. Upcoming. Right, so here we are in November. This is our last session of the year. We give ourselves a couple of breaks during the year because, life's complicated. good but complicated. So we've taken our summer break, and all of a sudden here we are facing down the double barrels of Christmas and New Year. Unlike our American colleagues on this call, who for some reason take this week off, we in the UK and most of Europe are going to work this week, but we're going to take all of Christmas off and probably some stuff either side, because that's the kind of people we are. So December, we're no shows. All of us are no shows. We're going to take a break, find some wine, do our Christmas December thing. We'll be back in play in January, however. So this is the November session, and we're going to do a couple of case study things. But next year, we're already putting together an exciting program of practitioner events. Michael Blumenthal did what we were just talking about. He made some spontaneous contributions and took a couple of the maturity model ideas and applied them to some practical scenarios, some stuff around managing Microsoft applications, for instance. And so he's going to talk to us hopefully next year about that approach, a very interesting sort of case study of doing maturity modeling in service management. We're going to go back and have a look at some of the competencies once we've got our head around all the stuff that's coming out about Copilot and AI, and see what we have to do to update everything, because, this week everything changed. And then we're going to try and look at some more case studies, as well as update finish the competencies we have running. If you've got any competencies or other things you'd like to see on these practitioner sessions, that's part of the interaction. Let us know. There already is a competency for AI and Copilot stuff. It's called Cognitive Business. I think we're probably going to keep that name, but it's going to have a lot more updates needed to be able to catch up with where Copilot's got to. Copilot is almost exactly a year old, and wow, there's a lot of it. And last time I checked, which was a couple of weeks ago, there were over 200 Copilots. I don't know what that number is today. It could be 1,000. It could be an infinite number, because Microsoft keep moving the goalposts on us. But we definitely ought to do some more stuff on Copilot and cognitive applications. So I think that there is a bit of a survey on this. So if you want to either grab that link or do the QR code thing, grab that. Tell us what else you might like. We'll gather those responses together. Wow, this is completely live. This is very impressive.
Yeah, this is live, so behave yourselves. But okay. the point is that we'd like to know from each of you what you'd like to have us cover next year. We have a schedule that's very open at the moment, and we want to make sure that we're focusing things based on what you have in mind. If you've just joined us, you may not have any ideas yet, but if you do, please feel free to enter them, and we'll have the results of this ready at the end of the session. So keep adding your ideas. There's the schedule for next year. We've got Michael penciled in for February. I have to confirm that with him, but that is probably one that's going to happen. He's got 2 articles in the maturity model space about in the practical scenarios section. If you want to check out what his ideas are about, we'll have a session on that. And we just want to make sure that we keep saying there are ways for you to contribute, and we'll say it again. Make sure that you think about any ways that you might want to add to the concept. That says thank you September attendees. That's my fault. I didn't change it to October. It's actually the October list. The topic for January is open to debate, so we will try to use that your suggestions to come up with something exciting for January. So we're going to jump into our case studies, and Simon Doy, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Mark. So hi all. So first of all, we're going to talk about sales process. So just in case you don't know, I run a small Microsoft consultancy, and this is something that I've been sort of working on. I've been slowly replacing myself, making myself redundant through the business. I don't really work on projects these days, and now I've moved into that kind of dreaded sales side. Well, actually, it's sales and marketing, to be honest. And I wanted to kind of just present some of my findings, our journey as a case study based on sort of looking at it through the lens of the maturity model. So where this first slide, where does the sales process, which competencies does it touch? Well, so if it's sales and marketing, then business process is a big part of it, which we'll get into in more detail. Communication is a really, really big part, whether that's internally or communication with our customers or potential customers. Customization development, so yeah, all around automation is again a big part of it as well, so I don't have to remember what to do. And staff and training, so as we can't start building through the sales process, it's all very well that it's great if it's all in my head, but if other people don't know what to do, then I need to get that information out there. I need to update those processes and train the staff and train the rest of the team. So those are the kind of the four primary areas, and then the fifth one, which is sort of in blue there, is collaboration. So yeah, we need to be able to collaborate, work well together, hand over as we win projects, hand them over into the various other departments, the delivery teams and the marketing team. And I'll more of that shortly. So in true traditional style, as Simon Hudson mentioned, level 100 is our default, right? When I came to this, it's like, well, sales is easy, isn't it? You whack a website up there, people contact you, they phone you up, you have a chat, they give you some money, and you win the opportunity. That's how it works, eh? That's it. So that was my initial sales process. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see how well that did. So yeah, we got no leads. People didn't come onto my website. They didn't contact me, and I didn't have anybody to phone up. I mean, we did win work through other means and through referrals, but that kind of classic website contact didn't really work. So we need to kind of up our level. We need to up our maturity, and so if we move to the next slide, sort of talk about how we went from level 100 to sort of a level 200. So what we did is we started to put something together, and this was still work in progress at this point. So we started having leads coming in, and they might come in via a website, so they might come in via email, through partners, through friends and your networks. And then we need to speak to that person and see if what they're wanting we can deliver, and that lead becomes an opportunity. So it's already sort of taking that initial kind of very simple level 100 sort of view and making it a bit more thought through. And then as we've identified that we've got this opportunity, we need to develop that opportunity. We need to have conversations with the customer and understand what their challenges are, and really sort of understand how we can help and support them in what they're looking to achieve, and ask those questions around what the goals, the objectives, with the idea then that we're going to create a proposal, or if it's a small piece of work, a quote, and then we're going to email, and then at this point we're emailing the proposal over, and then hopefully that opportunity is going to be won, and then we phone up operations and let them know that this project's coming in, and talk through with the delivery teams about what that is. So that's sort of level 200. If we could move next slide, please. So the result was, well, actually, I wasn't really sure because I wasn't measuring the number of leads and opportunities at this point, but it was definitely more than zero. So we're making progress here, and so we've got sort of level 200, and now we're moving to 200 to 300. So the learnings that I sort of took away from this, and one of the challenges with presenting this way is you don't see your notes, but
sorry.
No, that's fine. Absolutely, all good. So the things we learned was automation. So it's just me in the sales side. So I wanted to take the leads coming through the website and create leads automatically. I was using SharePoint to hold that initially. I wanted to have put some reminders in place, so reminding me to follow up on those leads and opportunities to keep those conversations going. And I found that I was creating proposals and copying and pasting, and generally forgetting that I'd put the previous customer's name and hadn't sort of checked that and made sure that that wasn't mentioned in the sales proposal, which then went out to this new customer. So I wanted to automate that. So we built, at the time it was chatbots. You know, that's well, it still is chatbots, isn't it? Copilot is that next evolution. But I wanted to build a chatbot which would allow me to go through and create that proposal, and I had different templates for different types of services we did. But that made a big difference to leveling up that sales process. I wanted to start tracking leads and opportunities, which I said I was using SharePoint, and then I wanted to start writing this down. Now I say this was for staff training. Do you know what? This was for me, just to remind myself how it is that I was supposed to be running this process. So I had something there. And I also wanted to report so that the rest of the team could see what was going on, what leads, what opportunities were there, just to kind of keep them excited, interested in what was going on. So you know, if they wanted to, they could go and find that information out themselves. So if I move from sort of that 200 to moving from 200 plus to 300, then it's really about data. So I wanted to now have something where we're using SharePoint. It wasn't great. I wanted to move that into a CRM system. So I ended up moving that into a CRM system. Now I could start measuring the number of leads which are coming in, measuring the number of opportunities. I could start thinking about maybe what conversion rates, and also then redoing these reports. So I wanted to have reports on, you know, which opportunities I haven't spoken to somebody recently on, and which leads and opportunities were hot and that the rest of the team could see. And so we built some Power BI dashboards and then pushed them out onto the internet, so they could go into the sales department SharePoint site and then access and see all those leads and opportunities, what's going on, so that you know, they knew that the business was going in the right direction, and also that I knew that the business was going in the right direction. And this sort of process, you know, it really started to kind of help us evolve our understanding of how we could sort of nurture these opportunities. And the one thing we stopped doing was we stopped emailing proposals. We started presenting the proposals. And so rather than just pinging it over an email and wondering if it got there, we'd get on a call or go and see the customer and present that proposal. And we found that had a big shift in how successful we were as well, because we could sort of address any issues sort of immediately. Cover the next slide, please. So we're kind of moving to a level 300 now, and the difference here is that, you know, 100, 200, it's all about, you know, I'm running the show, I'm running through everything. And then I started thinking about, well, actually, if I wanted to bring a salesperson on, you know, how would that work? I haven't actually hired anybody yet, but we're getting there. And the challenges we had is sometimes we were getting leads which weren't great for us. They weren't what we did, or the budgets weren't there, or the customer wasn't quite right. And so what we started to do is we started to build sales scripts. So we had scripts and questions which we would ask people and ask the customer and go through to qualify those leads before they got turned into an opportunity. And then also having those sales scripts for when we wanted to turn the opportunity to a sale, you know, we would have that further conversation and ask the right questions, you know, asking, you know, things around like, you know, ROI or what challenges they were having, and making sure that we've got those written down so that, you know, at the point where we want to scale the sales team, we could do that. We also introduced more automation. So when the opportunity was closed, we would, if it was won, we would replace this manual process of me going into Teams and telling Yvonne, our operations manager, oh, we've won this work, can you go and set up the project? We changed that so that the CRM had a Power Automate flow, which then would message Yvonne with all the information, and actually would message marketing as well, so they could go out and put out social media tiles around the project that's been won, and we'd have links to descriptions about the project, and then also a link to the process, which was in Viva Topics, around how to set up that project as well. So we were automatically kind of handing things over to them. So that was sort of, as we were moving to that level 100, that's much more mature, that kind of default maturity level, as we like to call it in the maturity model. If I go to the next slide, please. And so, so those learnings, just highlighting them. So we're improving communication, we're improving the consistency of that communication with the customers through sales scripts. We were making sure we were identifying those questions around ROI, which we could then use to, for example, in case studies, to kind of say, the ROI that we expected was this, and this is what it ended up being. We don't email the proposal anymore, we present it, and we're using automation to inform operations and marketing of wins. So currently we are at level 300, and we are looking to move to 400, but I think we'll stay at level 300 for a while, particularly until we've got more salespeople involved. But if we were looking at moving to level 400, this is what I was sort of thinking around, so continue to measure the number of leads and have that historical trend of leads coming into the business, measuring the number of opportunities, measuring the number of wins, and being able to calculate that conversion rate, so that we can sort of start seeing what our conversion rate is, so we can understand how likely we are that we're going to have a healthy pipeline. Maybe we need to tweak some levers to get more leads coming in, because we don't have enough to have those enough wins to keep the team busy. So those are the areas. If you think about level 400, it's all around that measurement and the quantitative side of a process. And so that's what I was thinking around as we move from level 300 to level 400. And I can't go any further than that. We are no further on with our journey. But if I sort of talk through the summary of these, I think there might be another click, unfortunately, but no, I thought I'd got rid of it all. So if we look at the business process and each of the competencies, then the business process, we enhanced the process by removing those manual steps. That improved the consistency. An example of that is informing operations and marketing teams of those wins. We end up actually putting in an operations system to kind of capture all the projects which were running, and so we created some automation to take information from the sales hub and put that into the project management system. Communication, we improved that through improving sales outcomes using sales script to capture those key challenges and understand the current sort of work that's involved, so that we can kind of establish a return on investment. Customization and development, there's more integration between the marketing and social media tools and the sales tools, and then the sales tools and the delivery team and project management teams. For an example of that is we use something called Toggle for time management, and so there's integrations into Toggle so that it sets those projects up. And then really important, along this journey, because we're all human, we forget about how we run these processes, how we do these things. And so having that staff and training, documenting those processes, communicating with the team as they change. So communicating with marketing, communicating with operations to say, look, we're now going to be sending you messages. Can you update your team channel so you get notified when you get messages into this particular channel, and keeping that training up to date is kind of really some of the key findings. And that is the end of the sales processes. Did anyone have any questions or any thoughts?
Areth?
It's on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Goodness me, of course I
There
had
you
to
go.
say that. Sound is working. Hello. Sound of music. Anyway, yes. Just got inspired by my own background there. Anyway, it's afternoon. Thank you very much. It was very, very good, good session. I mean, it was interesting, and it's always so much to learn. And we are on the same journey, a bit far behind you, I guess. But anyway, I was just wondering, how did you organize the training? I mean, how did you place the training? How much training should people have? I mean, part of it is, I guess, is just communication. But did you make like a program for the training, or how did you do this?
So yeah, I mean, I do have grand visions of using Viva Learning and things, and putting some collateral into SharePoint. We haven't got to that point as yet, but so with Yvonne, so I would sit down. We'd have a, initially just run her through. We'd do over a Teams call, record that. And then I'd create Viva topics content and put that in, put all the process and use Visio for process diagrams, and then link to the videos, but take Yvonne through that. And then as it was changing, then I would communicate with Yvonne and make sure that she was okay with it. And we have kind of regular catches up every week anyway, so we'd sort of talk through the processes or if things need to be ironed out. But yeah, I think one thing you can do is, as you see that things aren't working the way that you want them to work, is then you just quickly jump on a call with the person and just help course correct and say, we've just missed out on this, can we change this, or actually can we automate this bit because it's a bit of a faff, isn't it, and make that makes it easier, and it's one less thing for them to have to do. So yeah, that's kind of how we did. So it was kind of, I guess, lots of communication. There's and little course corrects, which you can do as a small organization.
Yeah, easier than in a big tank ship. Yeah. No, but it's but at the same time, the same principle does apply no matter how big or small you are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's that sort of evolved from the level 2 to 300 or 3 to 400. You're just little steps and course correcting until you get the result that you're looking to get for that level. So yeah, no, absolutely right.
Super, thank you.
Simon, there, Marc asked a question in chat. Wouldn't much of level 400 be delivered by a CRM? Simon H put in his thoughts, but wondered what you thought about that.
So it captures the information, doesn't it? So yes, you're capturing that information, but you still need to sort of maybe build some reports on that to kind of actually get the information out of it rather than the data. So yeah, it gives you aspects of that, but you need to know. You need to define what it is you're going to measure, and then use the CRM to kind of hold that information and then report on it so that you get that metric out, whether it's a KPI or whatever it is that you need. Yeah.
Probably that tailoring to your specific organization, whereas a CRM is a general tool and you can tune it to some degree, but you've got to get people up to speed, change their behavior, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I haven't talked about in this one was, because we were getting leads from different places, so we had lead sources, and then we started thinking, well, actually, we're getting leads coming from different partners, and we need to measure which partners are bringing in which leads, and so customizing the CRM, adding a field so that we could choose which partner the lead was coming from, or if it wasn't coming from a partner, if it's coming directly, that we could then start to see, well, actually, which partners should we sort of put more time and effort and energy with, because they seem to be, giving us the good stuff. So yeah.
Hi. Just quickly saying, I think a lot of that's still very much a CRM's job to some degree, in terms of the reporting, to give it, it may capture the information, but it can also tell you what you want to know about it, just with the reporting and so on. So I would still expect a CRM to do a lot of that, to be honest. Like,
no, absolutely.
Sources are giving you,
all of this is in a CRM system.
Yeah,
absolutely
cool.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will move on from Simon's section and we'll hand it over to Todd, my colleague, who will talk about how he has become brilliant at all things because of AI. Right, Todd?
That's really the lesson to learn here. And learning. So I've obviously, anytime you come to these kind of things, you learn a lot. Simon's session was very interesting to me. I learned a lot. One of the things that I learned is I never want to follow Simon again on one of these because I'm going to look bad with that kind of lead in. So be careful as you accept speaking engagements. Next slide, please. So we talked about the structure of the maturity model. Like most of us, before I had heard of the maturity model, I had some concept of it. When I was doing PowerShell stuff, before this, I talked about the crawl, walk, run scenario. I think the maturity model really helps define that, but also made it okay for me to stop in one spot. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Simon talked about it in his thing. With the crawl, walk, run model that I was using before, the idea was always to get to running. If you weren't running, if you were crawling, you were doing something wrong. With the maturity model, it defines where things are at. And so you know that it's okay for your organization to be a 300 at this or a 400 at this. And as I talk about the things that I did with scripting, that's something for you to think about. There's a lot of aspirational things in there, but your organization or your skills might be at a 300 right now, and that's fine. These are some of the competencies that I'm going to cover that are going to be helped with this. Mainly the green ones: infrastructure, building things out with scripting, communication, collaboration, all that kind of stuff. Being able to do repetitive things and know that they're going to get the same outcomes every time. Next slide, please. And Simon, like you, I had all of my notes in PowerPoint, but I've got it up in another window over here, so I still got all my notes. So how it began. So like 15 years ago, I was a budding SharePoint administrator, bright-eyed, the world was my oyster, and Microsoft had us out in Redmond, and they were showing us the betas of SharePoint 2010. And it was all things to all people. It was very exciting. And in one of the sessions, they talked about how they had great news for us. STS ADM was going to be replaced by this thing called PowerShell. Now, I'd never PowerShelled before that, and I had no idea how to use it. So there was the whole, anger, all the steps of grief. But I finally figured out that I needed to learn PowerShell. And so I was already a pretty experienced scripter. At that time, I ran a SharePoint 2003 farm that had hundreds of site collections, maybe thousands and tens of thousands of webs. And so I had to script things. So I felt pretty good with the scripting, but I didn't know anything about PowerShell. So I went out and bought the highest ranked book on Amazon, tried to read it. It failed. I got about 7 pages in. There's still a drool spot on that page where I just fell asleep and drooled on it. But how I really got started was I took a process that I knew how to do. And in this case, it was building site collections. I knew how to do that in the UI. I knew how to do it in STS ADM. And so now I tried to figure out how to do it in PowerShell. And that first time, it took me about an hour to get it done. But I did create that first site collection. So very proud of myself. But that let me isolate learning the language from learning the process of what I was doing. And so this very much fits into the level 100 of being an exploratory stage, just trying to figure things out, doing the same thing multiple ways because it's just not ingrained. So every time you're learning how to do it the first time. For me, level 100 looked like running a lot of very single commandlets, like create a site collection, done. Doing whatever. And almost every time I wanted to do something with PowerShell, it involved me going out and Googling. And this was before Binging or whatever was a thing. So I would go out and Google something else that somebody had done and then try to interchange the parts that would make it do the thing that I wanted. Definitely got some small successes here and there. So I got that little dopamine or serotonin thing to keep me going. And that really helped. And then as I was getting towards the edge of my 100 level, I started getting brave and doing some one-liners. And for those of you that haven't done PowerShell, it's stringing things together. It's piping things. So I might do get SP sites and pipe that through where object. A site is a certain template, or I guess it's not template, but certain name, and then do something to that. So I'm stringing things together. It's all on one line, but it's multiple pieces to it. And that was kind of how I started moving towards level 200. Marc? Level 200. Level 200, please. Okay, so this was when I was outgrowing my one-liners, and And the reason for that was with one line, you can only do so much when it comes to logic and branching and error correcting and things like that. And so the next step for me was putting all of my PowerShell into a PS1 file. And again, for those of you that haven't done PowerShell, a PS1 file is just a text file where you splat in PowerShell commands and it runs them in order. Now, this was very much in line with level 200 in that I had the process down, like I knew what I wanted to do, but it wasn't formal. It didn't have the same outcome every time because now these files, while they had all the steps in it, everything was hard coded. And so every time I wanted to do, like Simon mentioned, sending out a sales thing with the previous company's name in it, there was a lot of that kind of stuff where I would try to create a site collection or do whatever, and I would have to go through and make sure I changed all the variables, and I would never change all the variables. So it was always, instead of running my PS1 files and just letting them run, it was almost always taking a line out of there, running on a command line, seeing what happened, adjusting the next line so it would work, seeing what happened. But it did, and I guess another piece of it was I also had to start using an IDE. So before that, I was just throwing things into the command prompt and then seeing what happened. And now, like I had this process, I had to start thinking about the process. When I started typing the PowerShell at the beginning, I had to think about where I wanted to be at the end, and that made me start looking at the process as a whole, as opposed to just one thing at a time. This was also when I was starting to do these kind of things. It's also where I started thinking about the idea of having somebody else run this PowerShell. At the time when this happened, I was two people running this PowerShell thing. And so I wanted the other guy to do some of this stuff. And when I started playing with PowerShell, I went to a lot of PowerShell sessions. One of the people that had a big influence on me was a PowerShell MVP named Don Jones. And he was very influential to me. I learned a bunch of things from him. But one of the things that I loved about his teaching was he had this mantra of be the tool maker, not the tool user. And so with level 100 for sure, and even at this level of level 200, I was the tool user. I wrote the PowerShell, I ran the PowerShell, I troubleshooted the PowerShell because the PowerShell I wrote was bad PowerShell. But I always had this thing in the back of my mind, like I want to be the tool maker. I want to be able to move on to bigger and better things. And part of that was writing functions and modules. So a function is, writing a big block of code that takes parameters and all that kind of thing. And once you have those, you put those in module files. And I didn't really understand how to do that much. And it seemed like a ton of work. And for where I was at in the maturity model, it didn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't a great use of my time. So I was looking forward. I was so close to the edge. I knew what I needed to do. And that's where I started thinking about it. All right, so let's see level 300. Okay, so level 300, I was moving up in the world, and I kind of graduated from the PS1 files to PSM1 files, which are those module files. So now they're files that have functions in them. The idea behind this is every time I do the process, instead of pulling up a PS1 file and copying out the lines and all that, now I'm bringing in this module file, and this module has defined functions, and I have to write them in such a way that they are reproducible, that they they give me the same results every time. And again, this was this idea that I was going to share these things, collaborate with my coworkers. And so I started doing things like adding help. So if you do, to this day, if I'm doing something with PowerShell, I do get command a bunch, and to see if I've got the command I want. As soon as I've got the command I want, I up arrow and I get an example for it, and then start going from there. So I wanted to give that to the people that I was sharing this stuff with. So I started adding help. I started adding examples in the help, and I started defining parameters and checking parameters and all that. Another thing is this happened about the time that I was starting to do cloud things. And so as opposed to running my PowerShell on-prem where I didn't have to worry about security, now I was reaching out to the cloud. So I had to figure out how to do that securely. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the things that really was forced upon me at this stage was using source control. And Marc Anderson is smiling there because he was the the person that forced that. So I'd been aware of source control when I had the big SharePoint 2003 and 2001 farm. That was at a software company. So I knew all the developers used source control. I knew what it was. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a developer, so I'd never really paid attention to it. But then when I started writing these scripts at Sympraxis and doing this thing and sharing them with my other Sympraxians and with the clients, Marc made me start using source control, and he can attest to this, kicking and screaming. I hated it. And not only did I had to worry about source control, I had to switch my IDE. I had to start using VS Code, which just hurt me to my core because Visual Studio is something that developers use, and I'm not a developer. I'll die on that hill. And so I had to make this big change. When I came out on the other end, though, it was worth it because now I'm again starting to look at sharing things with other people, consistent outcomes. The source control gives me the history for the files. I had to learn what pulling and pushing was and all that, but it was a very good use of my time, and it absolutely helped me level up. And one of the things that helped with this, and I get like an angel gets its wings every time this happens. I love to use the word idempotency in talks. And so idempotent is the idea that if you run something 100 times, you get the same outcome every time, no matter what. And as I started writing these things that other people were going to read, and that, other Sympraxians who would judge me and make fun of me would read, and clients would read, I had to start looking at my processes and not just make sure that I had the right result at the end, but had to make sure that if somebody else ran it and they didn't have their environment exactly the way that I did, that it would also get them the same results. So I had to make things transactional and a lot of error checking. And while that was kind of a pain, it really ended up being very valuable to me. And again, it was very much worth the effort. So in the last couple of minutes, let's talk about level 500. The thing that brought you all here is how AI figures into this. So as y'all know, level 500 is, making sure that things are effective and optimized and, very performant, and that when new tasks come online, they're done the same way as the existing tasks are done. And while we obviously have people at level 500 for all kinds of things, AI makes it really a whole lot easier. And so when I do talks about AI and scripting and AI, I use all the superlatives. AI makes you faster and stronger and better looking and a better dancer and all these kind of things. But it really is true. It does all of those things. And so that's a short list of the things that I use AI for. When I'm using AI, it's mostly these days ChatGPT, though over the last 96 hours, I'm starting to think I need to find a plan B for that, and GitHub Copilot. Those are the two AI tools I use. There's a bunch of other great ones out there. Those are just the two that I've used. But I use it to create the code. So one of the things I will do is go into ChatGPT and say, write me a PowerShell function that does this, that takes these parameters and has this output. And it does it. Now, I never take that code and just blindly hand it off to a client. I always paste it in VS Code and I read it and I run it and all that. But it gets me over that tyranny of the blank page. It gets me over just where to start because ChatGPT does it. Also, as I'm describing it to ChatGPT, I have to think through the process. It's like the old thing of rubber duck debugging, where if you've got something you can't figure out, you describe it to a rubber duck and the rubber duck helps you figure it out. It's that process of working through it. I get that with ChatGPT as I'm trying to describe to it the work that I want it to do. And it writes the code. And almost always, when I do that, it writes the code that's really close or perfect for what I'm doing. And as I'm running it and reading it, I'm like, well, wouldn't it be nice to have this or this or this? So ChatGPT and I iterate on this, and that helps bring up the level of the output. One of the other things that I've done now is not only do I have it create the code, but I talked a couple of slides ago how writing things as functions and modules makes them more easily shareable, more easily reproducible. I'll just do that. So a lot of times I'll have ChatGPT write me something, I'll get all the functionality figured out, and then I'll say, make this a function. And it just does. And it figures out all the parameter types and it puts all the curly braces in all the right spots. Have no idea where curly braces go. ChatGPT does. I don't have to worry about it. So it creates that function for me. I save that out. I do what I want with it. And then after I tweak that a little bit more, then I go back into ChatGPT and I paste the code in and I'm like, write some help for this. Write some examples. And it does it. Instant documentation, instant examples, instant help. Normally, I have to tweak that a little bit, add some examples, make sure it's showing the things that I like. It does that. Another thing that I do with it is I have it make suggestions. So I get done with the code and I'm like, here's the code that I like. What do you think? And it'll offer things like, you should do some error checking here. You could tighten this up by using it for this way. Again, I don't ever use all of the things that it suggests, but it opens my eyes to things. And then if I'm really feeling brave, I'll add some other flourishes. I'll take a command or a function that I've written and I'll say, give this pipeline support. and it just adds it. Or give what if support, so you can run the command with what if to see what would happen without actually doing anything. It's really great. But what it does is it helps you move up those levels with less work. It lets you add level 500 functionality to your process, even if you're kind of more comfortable in the 200 or 300 level. AI helps you do that. And the final one that I'll mention here is I love to use it for explaining other people's code to me. So generally, when I go out and find code on the internet that does something that I like, it's written by somebody smarter than me. And if I'm not exactly sure what it does, because you should never run code you get off the internet blindly, I'll paste it into ChatGPT and I'll be like, look at this code and explain it to me like I'm 5. And it does. It explains, it steps through, tells me what all the things do. And I really like that. That really helps me ramp up. So that's kind of how I use AI to make myself a better scripter and to make myself able to move between levels a little more quickly. Do you want to go to my resources slide there? There you go. So I did some self-promotion. I've got some PowerShell scripts out on my blog. Most of them were not written with AI. Most of them are kind of bad, but they're out there. I did a talk on using AI with scripting specifically at the SharePoint Exchange Forum in Stockholm. I forget what it's called now. SEF stands for something else now. But I talk about all the different processes specifically of using scripting. Then I've got a thing there on how to write a function. I mostly put that there to show y'all how complicated it is, so you'll be impressed that I do it. Hopefully that's how that comes out. GitHub did a great study on how great GitHub Copilot increases your productivity. They seem to have a bit of a vested stake in that, but basically what they found out was if you use AI, use GitHub Copilot, you're able to write better code in less time. So it's not going to get anybody fired. Programmers aren't going to lose their jobs, but it will make you have better outputs and take less time. And then finally, there's this thing on the internet, at least as of today, ChatGPT. Who knows what those folks are going to do tomorrow? But that's where I do most of my stuff. So that is it. I went a little over. I apologize for that. Any questions about this? About AI? About PowerShell? About Iowa? Anything? Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
I had my microphone. I was muted. So we had Simon talk about sales, which is more of a business process, if you will, and Todd talked about writing PowerShell, which is more of a technical approach. And I think the interesting thing is that the maturity model thinking applied to both of those lays out sort of similarly. I mean, Todd sometimes ribs me that I use the maturity model to go to the grocery store. That may be true. That's more of a content management problem, but still. So the reason we want to do case studies like this is we want to show you how other people are using the maturity model and applying it in their cases. And it won't be exactly the same as what you're doing, but hopefully it'll give you some ideas. Marc has a question for you, Todd. How much does testing the code get reduced? Does this get automated also?
I've never tested code in my life, so I can't answer that. I'm just kidding. So I have it. It does both, and it's a very complementary thing. So as much as I hate Microsoft for using the same words for everything, it was Active for a while, Active Desktop, Active Directory. Then it was Power for a while, and now it's Copilot. As much as I hate that, Copilot is a perfect word for what this is. So we go back and forth on the testing. So it writes some code. I test it. I absolutely have it look at my code. So I will give it code and I will say, this is what I'm trying to do. And it will do that for me. Now, PowerShell specifically has some testing infrastructure called Pester built into it. I have not used Pester much. I should. I don't. Maybe I'll ask ChatGPT about that today. But I absolutely have it look over my code. I look over its code. So we very much work together on the testing to make sure the outputs are right. Also, for this one, have a dev tenant. I'm sure that they've talked about this 100 times in this session or in this series, but have a developer tenant. I test everything against my dev tenant because Lord knows what's going to happen if I don't.
Cool.
Simon Hudson, you had your hand up. Did you?
I was wondering, because you've talked about your progression from level 100 to 500. where do you tend to be today? Are you maintaining your level 500, or do you find yourself slipping down into bad habits and becoming only adequate?
So I would say on most days I shoot for adequate, and so I probably find myself hovering about a level 200 or 300 if I'm not doing anything. So like I write PowerShell for my own stuff. I write a bunch of PowerShell to do things here. It usually falls into the level 200, 300, 400. But if it's something that I'm going to use a lot, or if I'm going to pass it off to a client or a colleague, I always run it through the create, help, test my code, all that. I didn't always do that, but with AI, it's so much easier. It almost feels like cheating because I can say, I want to make sure this code runs fast. And ChatGPT does it. So I would hope, and Marc Anderson would be a better person to ask this question than me, but I would hope most of my stuff comes out 500 or close, because that's what I want to give off to our clients and my coworkers.
I think as well, Todd, by doing those things as well, when you come back to it a year later, you can go, oh yeah, that's what that thing does. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I saw something that's probably a well-known meme, that debugging code is like trying to solve a murder mystery where you're the murderer. And it's very much like that. And yeah, I write code and not only because like I can't remember the things that I did a year ago, but because the things I did a year ago, I did them so much more poorly than I do now. So it's kind of coming at it from the middle. But yeah, absolutely. If I run the stuff through and I have it write the documentation for me, I have it put. So another thing I'll do is if I've got code that I've used, I'll post it in ChatGPT or Copilot and have it write the comments and comment every line. So yeah, when I come back a year later, I have a fighting chance and figure it out what it's supposed to do.
All right, cool. We are almost out of time. I wanted to zoom back to that little survey we did. These are the topics that each of you have mentioned in a little word cloud. So obviously Copilot is squarely in the middle of that cloud. Everybody wants to know about Copilot. We will take these topics though and use them as we're starting to plan out next year. If you think about additional things as you go forward, please feel free to come back and use that survey. We'll keep an eye on it. And then I just wanted to jump to the end of the slides. Sorry, I didn't share through sharing in Teams the way we usually do, because Teams wouldn't do it. So that's not my fault. So these links are not clickable, but the slides will be available, and I will make sure that you can get to them easily. We will be meeting again next year on January 16th. Not clear exactly what we will be talking about, but we'll hopefully have a rousing session for you. And we appreciate you all joining us once again for the Microsoft 365 maturity model for Microsoft 365 practitioner session. We look forward to talking to you in the new year.
Have a great Christmas and holidays and all that stuff.
Perfect.
Bye, everybody.
And
Thanks for your time.
Simon and Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.